I'm Dr. Nicole Lipkin, and this is the Hey Kiddo podcast where we talk about all things parenting. Today, I am talking with Coleman Kraus about navigating gender. Coleman is a therapist who specializes in neurodiversity, LGBTQ plus, and eating disorders and trauma. So excited to be speaking with you today, Coleman. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Nicole.
Yeah. So we're talking about navigating gender. I think one of my first questions that I have for you, what are the signs that your child might be having gender identity questions?
Yeah, great question. And sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't, right? There might be ones
Yeah.
more visible to parents. Anything, questions often, watching where's your kid leaning into? What media are they attracted to? What styles are they exploring? Do you notice that maybe they're getting nervous in certain situations that you as a parent are surprised by? Do those situations have to do with bodies, have to do with clothes, have to do with who they're connecting with, who their peers are? But I think it's really about getting curious there, opening it up, asking your kid questions, and then what they say might be the real signs that you start responding to.
Like what questions? Like what would you open up if you're noticing something?
What's it like at the locker room in school? If you notice that they're feeling nervous on gym days or
Mm,
they're shopping in a certain section, like, tell me more. What's the style? Who are you looking at? What brings you to that section? They might say something about a pop star that's wearing something and they really love it, so they want to emulate, or they might start talking about their comfort or wanting to present in a little bit of a different way.
okay. And what about when you go down to younger children? So let's say, 3 to 5 and 6. Are there any signs there?
It can come out and play, right? At those ages, we're way less attuned to the social expectations of being cis and doing gender, in alignment with your sex. You might see different types of dress up. You might see more emotion coming up, right? That doesn't have the words. So if when we're getting dressed up, all of a sudden it seems like we're having a lot of emotional outbursts or crying, things like that, definitely pay attention. You'd also maybe be looking for just what friends, again, what adults do they connect with? What friends do they lean into? And just asking them in really casual ways, like, what feels good about that? What do you like about so and so? So that you can help them start shaping where they do feel that connection. And then you, as a parent, can keep kind of looking, right, and seeing for those opportunities to go in a little deeper or to hear something that you might not have expected to hear.
Okay. So, let's say a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old is preferring to, or like you said, is like around getting dress time, is getting more upset if they aren't allowed to wear what they want to wear. Like, let's say a 4-year-old's wearing, like, preferring to be in dresses or something like that. Talk about that.
Yeah. So many questions right from there, right?
Yeah.
Because you said not allowed. And so I think as parents, right, when we maybe are seeing some signs or wondering, is this a sign? I think the start of the conversation really is as a parent to check into what are my expectations? Where can there be leniency? What might I be afraid of if we veer away from that? And why are these my expectations, right? What's really at stake here for the parent, for the child, and for the family unit, right? And so, does that mean that there's a school rule about a uniform? And so, there actually is a rule not allowed. Does that mean that the parent maybe is really worried about how people might treat their kid if they're able to lean into that? And that's why it's not allowed. Or is there a thought within the parent that they're trying to teach how to be in the world to their kid, and their kid is this, and so this is what this means, and they're wanting to educate, like their intention, right, is to really educate in a supportive way how to be a 5-year-old boy without necessarily first getting to that layer of like, how is my kid actually feeling in their body?
Mm,
And
okay.
that can be a hard place because as a parent, right, we want to know, right?
Yeah.
What's the right thing? How do we lead our kid? How do we help them find their space in the world? And we might not know with gender.
Right. So how do so it's so complicated because how do you How do you seek to understand how your child does feel in their body?
Yeah. Yeah. And that there's a lot of ways in, but talking about bodies, right? And often in this parent role, our kids learn by looking at us and listening to us. They're taking in so much. And the way that we go through the world, often, right, as kids grow older and start individuating and learning more, they kind of move away and there's different parts of them that come out, but they really look at us as lived models of existence.
Yeah.
So when we as adults and as parents start talking about how we feel in our body, how we feel in our gender, what our clothes mean to us, why we push or pull different things, that gives a language to our kids to start understanding how to articulate the feelings they're having with their pushes and pulls, where they feel disconnected and when they feel connected. And so as their verbal skills grow, or as their ability, right, to even just reach out and grab the dress up thing that they want, we can start knowing that we're at least giving them the space to consider their body.
All right, so let's back up for a second because I hear you saying something. I hear a theme already coming through that it's so much about how we as adults are feeling about things. Like our reaction, obviously, our reaction to kids is so much about how we're feeling. And the gender thing is it's so touchy for a lot of us. So before we even dive further into kids, how do we do this for ourselves? Especially if we feel pretty kind of, I don't know if this would be the right word, like confident in our gender, or comfortable in our gender, what we've identified as.
Yeah, this is really a core, when there are cis parents and gender expansive kids, right? This is the core. How do you
Wait,
hold?
when you're using language, like, so cis being,
So cisgender is when your gender aligns with your sex and the assumed
okay.
gender of that sex assigned at birth. And then trans or gender expansive. Trans can be more binary. Some people are non-binary and identify as trans. Some people do not identify as trans but are non-binary. So I use gender expansive as the umbrella of anyone who's not falling, anyone who's agender, anything that's not, I am in alignment with. I was born at the hospital in 1980 and they told me this and we went home and I wore the pink dress and I felt good. Which that is not everyone's experience. Very broad
Okay.
generalization. Yeah. So when you might have a child who is a who is maybe, and maybe you find this out, or maybe is quite vocal about it, who might be a part of a minority group that you don't have any lived experience or maybe any education experience about, but you also know that there's this fear that if your child is a part of this group that experiences a lot of prejudice, well,
Hmm.
hey, like there might be this really knee-jerk desire for them not to.
Yeah.
And that can get so tricky because at the end of the day, the the core desire to keep your kids safe is so powerful. And sometimes when we don't have enough education or exposure really to something, we're going to run with that desire, right? To just that's not my kid because they're going to be safe and I'm going to be more well equipped to help lead them in some of their exploration of what it means to come of age and be in the world if I'm in a more of an alignment with who they exist as. But here's the really tricky part is that these are really real lived experiences for people and for kids. And it can be really real and really encompassing and like really central, even at an age of about 3 years old, right? Which surprises some people that the research again and again has really reaffirmed that as young as 3, kids might really know that they're not in alignment with the assumed gender of their assigned sex at birth. And to allow your kid to lead their felt experience when you know so many parts of their brain are not these resource developed adult brain thinking about all of these things, there's this trust. We have to trust that like your
Hmm.
kid has self knowledge. And as scary as it is, then we need to go out and get all this education, like how to support this kid. What does this mean? What is the language? What are the questions? And when parents still feel that hesitance, like I work with parents, I work with families, I'm like, let's meet, let's really talk, because you need to hear how important this is. Like, it's important, but the fear and wanting to keep your kids safe feels so important and so vital. The the suicide rates,
Mm.
particularly for trans and non-binary kids, are sky high. Like
Mm.
like one in four, one in five
Mm.
in the past year has seriously considered, if not attempted. And then when we add intersectionality, if we're talking about in 2023, there was a Trevor Project survey for LGBTQ, just as a group, and for trans and non-binary kids and youths, these numbers are even higher. That 11% of white youths seriously considered attempting suicide in the last year, and it was up to 18% for Middle Eastern and African youths, and 15% for Latinx. And
Mm.
when we're thinking about what's at stake here, like, I don't want to fear monger, right? That's not what this is. But for a parent to understand the power that they hold in bringing those rates down for their kids, when there is one accepting adult in the life of a trans or non binary kid, their rates go from 25% of attempt down to 19.
Wow.
And that's just for one adult. Like,
Wow.
you individually as a parent, like, hold that power to like keep your kids safe in that way.
Hmm. That's big. That's big. I'm jumping here and making an assumption that the psychological consequences of this are related to acceptance, feeling like an outsider, feeling like something is wrong with you. I don't like talk about that. What is related here rather
Yeah,
than assuming?
yeah, absolutely. That's, you're on it, and there's more. And I think that's where this can feel like an intimidating topic to get into,
Yeah.
particularly for people who aren't already in it, is that we get in and then it starts unfolding, and then we unfold with it. And then it keeps unfolding. And we're like, oh my goodness, how much is there here? And just to validate that for parents too, right? Like, even just listening right now, even just looking for a resource, going to Hey Kiddo, putting a podcast on, like that right there is like strength in yourself, and like strength in the relationship of care for your children. There's something called the minority stress model that's often
Hmm.
used to explain like health disparities, particularly in terms of like mental health, but also physical health. And it looks at, yes, these feelings of not fitting in, of feeling other, having a different experience, but it also encompasses acceptance, and also prejudice. Like, there are a lot of young trans kids out here right now who are looking at the news and listening to adults say really cruel things about them, denying that they could even potentially exist in their lived experience. They're seeing news articles where there are
Yeah.
kids being killed, going missing, going to conversion therapy, and you know, really, really experiencing a lot of violence. And that's a scary thing, to know that you're a part of a group that's at a really increased risk for violence,
Hmm.
even if it's not actively happening. In terms of attachment, that can be big. We talk about attachment a lot on this micro model of like attachment to caregivers and parent
Right.
figures. And that's so important. But something I'm really interested in the work that I do, particularly with marginalized communities, is thinking about attachment to more macro levels. What is our attachment to our government in safety?
Mm.
What is our attachment to our school administration? Right?
Right.
What is our attachment to right, to all these, it's the healthcare system, right? Do we trust
Right.
that the system is going to come through for
Mhm.
us, be safe, be reliable? Do we not? And those pieces of attachment, right? Like, if we even just lean into the healthcare, if we're thinking about, slightly older child, someone 12, 13, if they don't trust that they'll be safe, or
Right.
they'll be affirmed at the doctor, they're
Right.
actually less likely to tell you as a parent, I think I need to go to the doctor. I think something's wrong. And so you as a parent then might not know how to take care of their physical needs in the same way because the communication is starting to fall apart because the kid is feeling unsafe somewhere else. Even if you're the most affirming person, that's still huge
Right.
resilience. We really need to be looking to surround our kids with as many affirming spaces as possible so we can bring this stress down and help their health, their support, their
Right.
attunement to their surroundings go up.
Right. It feels so big though. Like I even think about I had this experience with my son and I really struggle with it. I really struggle with it because I'd like to think I'm a very open, communicative, thoughtful parent who's learning and evolving and trying to learn. And I hate this, but it happened. But I was buying shoes for Charlie and I gave him the choice and he picked bubblegum pink shoes. And instead of just pressing buy on Amazon, I said, "Oh, look at these," which I knew he would also like. Had like fire flames and all of that. And he's like, "Oh, I like those." And I've just sat here like, and that happened a year ago. And as you're talking, it's in my head because I'm like, you know, this is such a big thing and so important. And all of the things, these subtle things or not so subtle things that we do reflect on our children and the amount of work that actually needs to be done and what we need to unlearn. It feels so huge.
It is. And I love when people bring up, I'm thinking back to you asking what's a sign and what's not. And I love when people bring up the color palettes because in year 1905, pink was the boy's color and blue was the girl's color. And we
Huh.
flipped it. And now we're like, is it a sign that he might like pink? Well, it used to be the boy thing. And
Interesting.
we socially, we in our created joint society, we changed it. And we could say that's for one reason or another, this and that. Sometimes it's about industry and capitalism. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
about just shifting trends. Sometimes it's literally a war happened and we need to have different people drinking our alcohol now. And so we're gonna like rebrand. And then the expectation, right? There's this big pressure put on us as parents, and we can feel it out in society that there are these pressures, there are these things that we feel. I'm sure unconsciously your brain was going to what might happen at school, what might a friend say, what I'm trying to keep my kids safe, looking good, has the right shoes, they fit, they're gonna not cause a disruption. And I think when we get to that disruption piece, we start playing a lot of social games.
Yeah.
It was in your mind.
Yeah.
And then when we invite our kids in to continuing to perpetuate the social games, it puts walls up for them, whether or
Right.
not they resonate with the gender assumed by their assigned sex at birth. All of a sudden, the exploration of different clothes, fashion, styles, sports, ways of chatting with friends, like they're told like in different ways, in a lot of unconscious ways, and not so strongly, but they hear feedback all the time from the world. Thumbs up for this, eyebrow raise at this. Thumbs
Yeah.
up for this, eyebrow raise at this. And how kids learn, right, is that social learning. What is the
Sure.
feedback I'm getting when I'm doing these things? And so that puts us in a little bit of a pickle where
It
when we try
does.
to affirm and validate, our signaling to our kid might contrast some of the other signaling they're getting in the world.
Right. And I think the work, so let's, again, I want to talk about the work that we need to do as adults, because that's such a powerful, those were very powerful stats and very upsetting stats that you shared. And also affirming that one person, one that is supportive can make the world of difference. But it's like, how do we get beyond our own BS here? Like, how do we do this? Because, I can't figure it out. I can be educated, I can get training, but unlearning unlearning the way my brain has been structured feels so hard. And again, I feel like I've been structured in a very open way, but I still make comments like that.
Yeah. Well, great question. And honestly, what my lived experience is and what the research also affirms is that just being around more gender expansive people will do, like, in a safe way.
Mm.
We don't want to go, if we know our biases are so big that we're going to go in and then bring prejudice or bring discomfort to a trans space. Like, let's not do that, right? We might start with books, we might start listening, we might start with movies, shows, things like that, reading articles. But most people in the country don't know a trans person.
Yeah.
And the amount of acceptance of trans people as real and as unharmful people just trying to live their lives, those numbers go way up as soon as you know a trans person. And so what
Right.
I say as parents, like, go find ways to be in
Mm.
contact, witness, or take in, or be engaged with more queer and trans community. And just
Mm.
seeing, oh, people live like this. Like, yeah, great. Oh, I really like that person. Oh, that person's got some great, I really resonate with this parts of that person. And just allowing it to be normalized in your life and your mind, right? And then it might not stand out so much when your kid is going for the pink shoes because your friends got the pink shoes, right? And these don't even
Right.
necessarily need, we don't need to go to, like, okay, we're at the meeting of all the trans people and you're right in the middle. Like, that's probably not what it's going to be
Right.
for a lot of people. And I know
Right.
where I'm sitting right now, I'm in Brooklyn, right? So there's so many people available
Right.
to engage with in
Right.
community. But even just connecting with people who might push back a little bit more on some of these assumed roles in society.
Mhm.
Might be a straight cis man, but maybe he does do some fashion differently. And maybe he does do some things that might be seen as eccentric. And how can we welcome in people who are not just following what you'd assume? Right? Because then our kids are around those people too, and that opens up their minds. Oh, maybe that would be okay. Oh, maybe I would want
Right.
that. I didn't know that was a part of the world.
I love that because that feels very accessible.
Mm.
That feels like, yeah, go get to know people. That feels like, and like that process. And that's very true. It's like in all aspects of life, the only way we fight our own biases and our own fears. It's not necessarily like sitting in a class could be helpful, but oftentimes it's just getting to know people and talk to people that we had fears around or biases against.
Yeah, and I would say do the both.
Do
When
both.
we think of what can we do as parents, you said it feels so big, and so many people are starting from a point of, like, I've never explored this before, like in
Right.
myself, in other relationships, as a parent, then that's a whole other dynamic. There are so many resources out there, and we often are so far outside the conversation, and then it starts coming into our life and we're like, oh my goodness, where do I go? What do I do? Let me get on Google. Let me, like, talk to
Yep.
someone. There's so many different answers to some of these questions. And some of these things we're still working with. And there's so many incredible trans people, particularly trans people of color, always have been leading the way, always have been at the forefront, and they deserve such a platform and for us to really be listening to them. But go to genderspectrum.org. There are so many resources. Like, literally, what if my kid wants to change their name at school? Like, there's a doc and it's just going to talk about
Oh,
all different things, and it's going to give you language, and it's going to point directions of, like, talk to this person, talk to that person. If your kid really is saying, like, no, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, and it's getting to the point where you're like, we're letting him dress the way he wants, but, like, what do we say to people? They've got template letters to send to your community
mm.
and family members discussing what's going on, making requests. Like, there's support out there. Even if something's happening, like, go to GLAD. They've got even, like, legal resources if there is something that's happening or you need the school to be more affirming. Like, get someone behind your back. You don't have to go it alone.
So genderspectrum.org and glad.org.
And then the other resource that's really, really great is the Trevor Project, and particularly for particularly for tween kids and teen kids. It's a great resource. They've got a texting, they've got a DMing, and they've got a phone line for
Mm.
suicide prevention 24/7, 365. But they also have opportunities for younger gender expansive kids to connect with each other on like safe platforms and talk to people around the world, so that if there isn't someone else at their school or in their classroom, they don't have to feel like they're always in this space of the other, if that's how they're feeling.
Okay, I love that. Let's talk about the families where religion plays a role, a strong role. And as part of the religion, this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, there aren't really, I'm trying to think of a religion where actually in the central text, or the central
Scripture, whatever. Yeah.
scriptures, yeah, whether that's a book, whether that's, scripture, that actually discusses this directly. Like, these
Mm.
words are not in anyone's core thing. And so, I don't want to dismiss anyone's religious experience, right? I don't know what listeners are holding as they're coming in. This is very important to so many people. But when we really actually just get to the roots of spirituality, right? Getting to the roots of like, what are the values and what are the pillars of what you genuinely believe about your religion? Why is it that you so resonate with this religion? What do you think this religion at its core, not what might be said online and associated with something, not what one other person in your church might be saying as a tie, but like at its core, is there space for love and acceptance of the miracle and spirit of another person? And I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people can find that space there, that even if it doesn't feel perfect, and even if there's concern that it might go against some of the teachings or some of the expressions, or where leadership in their religious spaces might be holding or naming, that for most individuals, right, like their connection with religion is about something sacred, right? About
Mhm.
love, about kindness, about trying to work to be better people in the world, better neighbors, better individuals,
Mm.
to really showing up, holding holding people as sacred, and ourselves and God as sacred, right? That this is a beautiful miracle of being here. And I think in that, even if it doesn't perfectly settle as a parent, there might be space to hold. We're staying with love, and someone's telling me something, whether or not I completely believe them or I want them to go here, this person actually could be at risk for leaving this world if we're not able to find a space for them in this world.
Mm.
And that, for a lot of parents, is the kicker. When we go back to that minority stress model, two of the huge factors there are housing instability, and whether or not parents have tried to convince you to not like to just pretend and to go back, or to go to conversion therapy. Doesn't even need to be as explicit as trying to get someone to go to conversion therapy, though that does very unfortunately happen. So if we can just get rid of those two things, right, we might like have some of the stress and the mental health outcomes for them.
So wait, that's interesting. So what you're saying is one of the main contributors to suicide, or one of the main contributors to mental health outcomes, is parental support.
Yeah, so it's
I would
one of the main contributors to the minority stress, right? Which then is hugely associated very significantly with mental health outcomes. So
got you.
it's not a one-to-one. Someone could be kicked out of their home for coming out as trans, and they also could be very mentally healthy. I mean, that'd be a really strong person. That's a
Yep.
huge, huge, tragedy and hardship to go through. But when we think about going out into the world as someone who might be uncertain or exploring, or might be, very visibly in a body, or in a gender identity that's not the majority, there might already be all of these spaces of unsafety or potential unsafety out in the world. And then there might be safe spaces, right, that we go
Yep.
to.
Yep.
When we come home, right, most people coming home is kind of like, oh, I can take off my work mask a little bit. I can take off my like being on mask a little bit. I'm not like walking down the street with a bunch of other people, kind of just clocking what's
Right.
going on. I need to avoid, we relax. And
Yeah.
so when we think of a kid, right, thinking of, oh, like a 7-year-old kid comes home and needs to put on more of a mask at home
Mm.
than they do at school, like that for a lot of parents, like that's what gets the heart, where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm still struggling with what my beliefs are.
It's interesting that you're saying that way because that resonates so much because, we're so worried about the safety of our children, but not creating that safe space at home because of whatever reason is enhancing the lack of safety for that child.
Yeah. And for
That's
people
big.
who don't have lived experience, right? It's difficult to understand how visceral this can be for kids, how directly in tandem to their mental health, because it's very impactful. And like I have lived experience of this. And like, ooh, when people think this isn't
You
real,
talk
if this
about
isn't
that.
legit, yeah, my parents are great. I love them. We're very close. They're very accepting and affirming. They've always been very open. I grew up with my parents. There were things said around the house like, oh my gosh, I think I love gay people better than straight people. And I'm like in middle school, and like, like just like we were walking down San Francisco Pride at 13 and there's naked people dancing. And my parents are like, this is really like amazing. Like, yes, we love a mix. Like my parents love a mix. They love openness. And they were always very open to me. I always was dressing in the boys section, this and that, except for when we'd get dressed up for holidays, right? Like the dress up clothes were more gendered and as open as my parents were. And I'm 3 years old, running, tearing through the yard, roughhousing with the boys. I'm like, "Sign up for football, mom." And like, like they knew that and they loved that. And they really accepted that. And then the Easter dress comes out. And all
Yeah.
I can think is I'm going to climb the tree at church after the service, and it's going to feel like I don't have pants on because I'm wearing a dress. And the amount of humiliation and shame in my body in
Mm.
that moment without the words for it, because I'm like 3.5 years old, almost 4, I guess. And I remember like the pounding in my ears, my vision starts to tunnel.
Wow.
I'm in my room alone with this thing, and I didn't know what to say. And
Mm.
I didn't know what to do. And so I went and got scissors and I just cut up the dress.
Mm.
And my mom came in and, I like to think I was pretty well behaved as a kid. So she's kind of shocked.
Yeah.
And she got angry.
Yeah.
And of course, because she didn't know and she hadn't been,
Yeah.
and she loved me and she loved me, but I wrecked something and I was claiming it was an accident and she knew it was on purpose. And
Yeah.
so her parent brain is going, I need to teach my kid that this isn't okay. Like there needs to be a consequence. Like, not that it was anything crazy, but like clothes cost money and like that. And now we've
Yep.
got to go to church and the thing that I was planning for you to wear. And she's juggling 27 other parenting things. I've got 2 siblings and she's trying
Yep.
to organize it all. Her brain's doing 100 things and my brain was doing one thing. And I
Mm.
think as parents, as much as it can feel really difficult, I talk to people, they're like, like the name is changing and it's going back and forth. And like, I have work to do. I have to run this house. I got kids to raise. I
Yeah.
can't keep up. And I'm like, I hear you, right? I get how crazy the world is. And yet we do need to stop in our tracks because what might be happening inside for your kid right now is massive. And it's really going to impact if it continues going unheld or unnoticed, or that there just isn't enough slowness for it to really open up and be understood, it's really going to impact their life path, whatever that looks like, right? Whether that looks like, there are people who come out in their 60s. What have they been holding all these years, whether they've known or not? Some people maybe don't, maybe never ask the questions. For me, what it looked like was a very slow and painful shift as I got older, that
Yeah.
I was coming to realize that the world thought I was a woman or a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember coming home, 3rd grade, horrified and enraged. I was like, Mom, you'll never guess what. They told me I couldn't play the game because I was a girl. Like, can you believe it? What is that? What's going on? And I would always wear like the boy uniform at school, and they weren't super gendered, but I would always go with the boys one. And And everyone kind of knew I was different. I still remember his first and last name at my fourth grade birthday party. It was back in the 90s when it was in your backyard and you open gifts in front of
Yeah.
people. And this one classmate of mine, he seemed kind of nervous and fidgety. And I liked him. We were friends. I was like, what's happening? Whatever. And it comes to his gift, and he goes beet red. And he said, I'm so sorry. My mom did the shopping
Mm,
and she doesn't know. And I didn't know what he meant. And I felt bad that he was feeling so much shame, clearly, and anxiety. And I opened the gift and it's makeup. And he in fourth grade so saw like my
mm,
genuine self
wow.
without anyone using words or changing a name or changing a pronoun. He so saw who I was that he was horrified that he'd gotten this inappropriate gift for me.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, that's fine. And I handed it to my sister and she was all happy. And then she ran off and we passed by it. And so there was this real acceptance here. And I think part of it was that I went to an international school in Europe
Yeah.
in some of these like coming of age moments, right? We are getting a little bit into more like middle and later childhood. We moved back when I was going into late middle school and I went to a public school in the Northeast in a great town with a great school district, but it was there was a lot less differentiation, people
Yep.
coming from different backgrounds, different races, different cultures, different cultural practices, different languages. And all of a sudden, the volume of sameness and of the
Mm,
pressure to adhere to sameness turned way up. And and I was bullied. I was eating lunch in the bathroom. My neighbor, bless her heart, she tried to be such a good friend. And I'm sure she had talked to her parents about it. And she pulled me aside after we had played at one point and said, I need to tell you because you deserve to know. Everyone's calling you a he, she at school. And that broke my heart. Again,
yeah.
the anxiety, the like that, like they honestly, like looking back, I mean, this is kind of sometimes a trans joke. They were right. Like
Yeah.
it was gender expansive. I was trans. Like they
Yeah.
clocked it. And I didn't have that language for myself yet. I had had it when I was very young. I wish I could switch places with my brother. I wish I was a boy and make everything so much more easy. Like, why is that? Like, oh, all these things. It had never connected completely the way that I think the conversation today, so
Yep.
many more people understand, so many more people catch it. And
Yep.
and then we don't have these misses because what happened was after a year of being back in the US, I made the decision to become a girl.
Mhm.
And it was like a name thing in my family. We were on vacation at the time, and I was on the beach with my sister, and I said, this is too hard. I need to become a girl. Can you teach me how to be a girl? And
Mm,
she was very excited, right? Because she'd had this assigned female at birth sibling that clearly was not feeling like a sister her whole life, and she was jazzed. And my brother was on the bed in the room sobbing, and my mother was soothing him, and he was saying, I'm losing them."
wow.
And you know what? He was actually right because
Mhm.
I completely lost myself for years.
Mm,
I started have I became very, very mentally ill and very physically ill.
mm,
And I had all sorts of friends all of a sudden, right? Like, great, you've been accepted. I'm playing sports, my teachers love me, I'm getting good grades. And then it just starts dropping off and dropping off. And puberty started. And I look back at that now. I'm in my 30s, and I look back at that now as like one of the biggest traumas in my life.
wow.
And it was really scary and it was really hard, and I didn't have the language, and there was no trans conversation around me. I mean, when I was coming out as gay, like I knew in my real life one gay adult, and I was like, my Aunt Suzanne's friend is gay, these people exist, like that, and it was like in media and on TV
Yeah.
and stuff, the internet was kind of becoming big,
Yes.
and I knew it was real, but in terms of knowing somebody, being exposed to it, it being normalized is so important. But I really lost myself, and it took me so long to get back to myself. And
Mm,
it was really deeply sad. Like when I think back, even to some of those years, I've done so much work with myself, healing how difficult it was to be so distant from myself
yeah.
and how much I suffered with people not knowing how uncomfortable I felt in so many different situations, how wrong I felt, how difficult it was to manage my body. And so I think again, like with parents, like thinking this is so scary, this is so big. It is. Yeah, 100%. And you're going to need support and you're going to need resources. And there's going to be times that you don't know and your kid doesn't know and you get it wrong. And it's so hard and there's a rupture and we need a repair and yeah, all of that. And yet, right, when I think back to, oh my gosh, what if someone had caught it and had the language and helped me avoid like a decade of like real pain in my life? Like it could be a hard decade now, or it could be a hard decade later, or your kid could go through a hard decade on their own.
That is, thank you so much for sharing that. That for me just completely, I'm speechless. Thank you for sharing that. I feel hopeful that people are talking about this now. Like you're saying, this is a different time period. We're talking, there's a lot of bad around it, but there's so much good around it. We're talking about it. We're learning about it. We're it's just different now than it was when you were growing up. It's different now. And thankfully it's different. You know, when you cut up your dress, what do you wish your mom said to you,
It's a great,
knowing what you know now?
that's a great question. You know, and I really do want to give another shout out to my parents. I mean, they're incredible parents. I have so many friends who are just
Yeah.
like, you know, like they're really just such great people. They're such open people. There are so many things, I think. And it's not so much what she would have said, right? But I wish that she had known something that I hadn't known. That
Mm,
we can notice this and this can go somewhere and we can do something different, right? Like in so many places, my parents were like, yeah, you want the slacks and the shirt and the whatever and the yep, go for it. I wish that I had known, and I wish that she had known to let me know. And let's go buy you a suit, and that's fine,
yeah.
right? Like, because whether or not I ended up my path and where I am now and who I am now, maybe it just was that there was something about that I wanted to climb trees and that felt violating that
Yeah.
someone might see like my underwear or my body in a way that I didn't want them to because of what I was wearing, right? Like even if it was just about the dress limiting the physical activity or the adventures that a young girl can engage in, like is it okay to step away from the dress? And
Yeah.
if we say it's okay, what we're doing is we're not saying this was the signal, my kid's gender expansive, here we go. But what we're saying is let's see what happens. Okay, great. We're going to get you some really snazzy pants or dress clothes that aren't a dress, whatever. We're going to get you some really snazzy ones. Great. What happens next? Does that just solve everything? Or is it, oh, and now here's another place where we need to lean a little bit more. And here's another place. And as your kid notices that there's this ability, right, to say and be received and then for things to change, that's their agency. That's agency building. And as they develop their agency, which is so important for kids, right, so developmentally appropriate, it's learning, this is a beautiful opportunity. As their agency grows, they'll tell you more because they'll ask themselves more because they know that they can and then they can speak and be heard.
Hmm. When you decided, okay, I'll be a girl, this is too hard, what do you wish you heard then?
Don't.
Mhm.
If it's that hard, we need to change something about what's happening,
Mm.
not change you. And my parents didn't, I didn't articulate that to my parents in that way. If I'm going to, it's because it's too hard. You know, I think some of the really internal things that are difficult for kids with this, and I'm not speaking for everyone. People have very different experiences. This is just mine. And I do know that there are others who share some of these themes, you know, at that young age, right? I was still in middle school and I could so see the feedback of the embarrassment, uncertainty, and and like rejection from people around me that I was trying to protect my family from myself. I didn't want my family to have to be associated with something that the world was saying was so wrong. I didn't want my family to have a kid that was eating lunch in the bathroom. I didn't tell my parents that until
Mm.
later because I was ashamed and I didn't want them to have to be ashamed. I didn't
Oh,
want to cause shame in others through my own shame and otherness. And so that's where like adults like really leaning into like being just involved in these
yeah.
conversations and the education. Like there are ways that you're not going to know more about your kid's gender before they tell you, but there are ways that you can learn about this stuff so your kid can see like, oh, you know more about this stuff than I do. Like you took a
Right.
course and like you're like,
Right. And that's why you were saying before, do the education and go expose and get friends and surround yourself with people. So that's why you're saying both are.
yeah.
I see like it's wrapping up. I see the critical, like all of it, all of it.
Because it's something that when we're genuinely making space for something and an identity, right? I can bring this up. I can talk about this. This is one of my passions. I made this my work too. I
Yeah.
mean, like I love this. I talk about it all the time. I bring it up all the time. I have queer and trans friends. Like they bring it up. We talk
Yeah.
about it. But some of the moments that I love best, and I think would have just been so exciting for me as a kid. The other day I was talking to my mom on the phone, and she said, yeah, I was reading this article about like trans this and that, and I'm reading about some of the activism work that's happening, and like that just feels so nice that it's not something that I'm always bringing into the space, or
Right.
it's just about me, or it's just my little different thing. It's like this is an important thing in the world, and we're going to talk about it. Like if you're a parent and you have multiple kids, and one is either exploring or knows that they're gender expansive, talk about queer stuff when that kid's not in the room. Talk about it to your other kids. Like,
Yep.
because then your other kids will be like, yeah, these are just important things. Oh, what was that show with that, trans actress on it? And oh, isn't it so cool? Did you see she spoke and said this stuff? Like, these are just important things in the world, right? This isn't
Right.
just so and so's around that we're all accommodating in a way that we don't do when they're not
Right.
genuine space.
I know we don't have time, but the whole other topic that you brought to mind that I'd love to talk about at some point is your siblings. I mean, that's and what you just said, and the loss that your brother felt, and the gain that your sister felt, and that dynamic, or when it's just that all of that. There's so much more than just parents, and how do you navigate all of that?
Mhm.
But I know we're out of time.
It's true. And I will say, just as the end, didn't really seek permission from some of these loved ones to mention, shout out to my siblings. I mean, my sister lives farther away. She's in London, but my brother's here in New York City. And we just see each other, and he's such a big supporter. They're great. So
Awesome.
it changes over time. Just to leave it on that, it changes over time. It's a journey. It gets better. I know that's the tagline thing, like it does. And your family can really figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. So if there were 5 top takeaways that you want to leave listeners with, what would they be?
Yeah. So one, proactively seek out education from an engagement with gender expansive and trans media text events and talk about it. Two, hold a lens of loving curiosity, emphasizing an understanding of the unfolding journey of self-exploration your child is on. Three, create an environment of calling in others about names and pronouns so your kid doesn't have to be alone in this. Speak intentionally with your kid beforehand about what feels right there, words, tones, boundaries. Four, discuss your own reflections on your gender within yourself and your gender in the world with your child. If you haven't reflected on this before, start now. And five, continue to offer compassion and understanding to yourself as a parent. You may feel that you're trying to both lead and follow your child simultaneously. Your support system will be an essential part of your ability to show up in fullness to your child's journey.
Coleman, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Hey Kiddo. If you like what you hear, give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about Hey Kiddo at our website, hey-kiddo.com. Have a question for our experts? Email us at hello@hey-kiddo.com.